Alright, other than the controversial undisputed clash between Vasily Lomachenko and Devin Haney, the combat sports world has been relatively quiet lately. And though there are some major fights coming up in the future that I personally am excited for, there is one fight with millions and millions of dollars being thrown in the marketing budget that I'm just not too sure anybody cares about. Yes, I'm talking about the clash between Nate Diaz, the realest of the real, and the man-child that may or may not be taking a big fat dump all over the legitimacy of combat sports, Jake Paul. I have to give Jake credit where it's due. There is a really smart marketing strategy between the way he's been picking most of his opponents, whether it's Ben Askren, Tyron Woodley, Anderson Silva. Jake has cherry-picked guys with huge names in the MMA world who, in all honesty, probably would beat him in a real fight. But since these were all boxing matches, it created a level of reasonable doubt, since no one really knew just how good Jake was when it comes to boxing, and at the same time, no one really knew how good MMA fighters in general were at boxing. But since these fights, we've already gotten an answer to these questions. Yes, a reasonably athletic guy in his mid-20s who devotes all of his time over 5 to 6 years to just purely boxing, with millions of dollars to spend on the best trainers, the best facilities, and allegedly the best PEDs, can in fact beat a retired MMA fighter in a pure boxing match. Which, at the end of the day, it is still really impressive. But as we've seen with Jake versus Tommy Fury, as much effort and hard work as Jake puts into boxing, over the course of 5-6 years, he's still not on the level where he can beat an actual legitimate professional boxer, even someone like Tommy Fury, who's on the lower end of the professional ranks. And when you look at Nate Diaz, yes, he's known to have some decent boxing, but what everyone's leaving out of this conversation is his boxing is pretty good for an MMA fighter, not compared to actual legitimate professional boxers. On top of that, Nate Diaz spent the majority of his career fighting at 155 pounds. And the guy is 38 years old, and yet again, it's the same story of a retired UFC fighter. To put it simply, when it comes to Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz, we are not going to see a high-level boxing match. What we're most likely going to see is Nate Diaz look like a fish out of water, especially in the early rounds, considering the fact that he's never had a professional boxing match. And I'm pretty sure he's never had any boxing match at all whatsoever, not even an amateur match. And as much as I hate to say it, he's most likely going to get stopped by either a TKO, a doctor stoppage, or God forbid, he's going to get knocked out cold. This is not like the other fights that Jake Paul's had. In the other fights, we were all curious about his level and whether or not he actually could match up with somebody who is not necessarily a boxer, but a guy who is a legit professional fighter. But now, we've already seen that over and over and over again. The only bit of intrigue left now is that if Jake were to go in there and lose this fight, then the show's over. And even he knows this. And that's why he didn't want to rematch Tommy Fury, even though he put a rematch clause into the contract. That's a fight that he's just probably not going to win. Jake and his team knew that there was only one guy out there who he could fight that's a beatable opponent and will generate the kind of revenue that they're looking for. And it's Nate Diaz. That's why in this fight, unlike all of his previous fights, Jake and his team are doing a 50-50 split when it comes to all of the revenue. Hell, if you even look at the posters for this fight, these guys aren't side to side or looking at one another how you usually see. Nate Diaz is literally in front of him, which kind of points to the fact that when it comes to all the negotiations, Nate is essentially the A side. I'm not trying to make it seem like anyone is desperate here, but at the end of the day, I think that the writing's on the wall. We've already seen the influencer versus MMA fighter, and now at this point, we all understand how that fight goes. We've already seen the influencer versus the real boxer, and now we already know how that fight goes. At this point now, it's not going to be a high-level boxing match. There aren't a lot of questions left. I mean, if you look at the odds for this fight, we all know who the favorite's going to be, and we all know what the most likely outcome is going to be. I have a hard time believing that this fight is going to generate any crazy pay-per-view numbers. Me personally, I'm a complete and total degenerate. If two people are walking inside of a ring and or a cage with their intention set on putting hands on one another, chances are I'm probably going to watch. But I have to say, out of all of Jake's previous fights, this is by far the one that I'm the least interested in. And if this fight ends up not selling great numbers, it makes me really wonder who is there for him to fight next. At the end of the day, according to the man himself, the fight that did the best numbers was his most challenging one in Tommy Fury. I think most people are only willing to give their attention to him if they truly honestly believe he's going into a fight which he has a really good chance of losing. And if he continues to go out there and lose, then that kind of takes away the thing that made him a draw in the first place. Overall, I think depending on how this fight goes, we may be looking at the beginning of the end for influencer boxing, or at the very least, this subsection of influencers fighting MMA fighters. Let me know in the comments below, how do you guys feel about this fight? Are you excited for it? Are you willing to pay the pay-per-view for it? And who do you think is gonna win? Also, your boy just made an Instagram. The username is below. Feel free to drop a follow. I think I'm planning on doing a couple giveaways in the near future, but I'll definitely keep you guys posted. Thanks for watching.